The morning I found my barn in ruins, it felt like a punch straight to the gut. That barn wasn't just for walls and a roof, it was part of my family's history. Built by my grandfather's hands, standing tall on the same land for nearly 70 years. But when I stepped outside and saw nothing but splintered wood, shattered tools, and my tractor buried under debris, my anger boiled hotter than I'd ever felt before. And standing at the edge of the wreckage, smug as could be, was the HOA president with her arms crossed, flanked by 2 of her board members. "Your barn didn't meet community standards," she declared, not even flinching as she watched me stare at the destruction. "We warned you it had to come down." My voice shook as I tried to contain the rage. "That barn isn't even on HOA land. You had no right," but she just smirked, flipping her sunglasses down like she'd just accomplished something noble. "We're cleaning up this community," she said, "whether you like it or not." I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms, but I didn't yell. I didn't threaten, because I knew something she didn't. See, long before the HOA even existed, my grandfather struck a deal with the county when he helped build the dam that created the lake. That deal gave our family control of one very specific thing, the massive water valve hidden beneath the dock. And that valve controlled the flow of water to the entire $5 million resort lake the HOA loved to brag about. They thought tearing down my barn was the end of it. What they didn't realize was that they had just handed me the perfect reason to remind them whose land they were really standing on. For the next few days my life narrowed down to 2 things: paperwork and quiet observation. I played the part of the wronged man, perfectly staring at the wreckage, cataloging every broken beam and bent nail, calling contractors for estimates, and speaking in calm, measured tones whenever the HOA called with their lectures about community standards and safety concerns. Inside, though my head was a whirlpool of plans, I spent long hours in the county records office, poring over maps and deeds by lamplight, tracing the web of easements and rights that had been inked into law long before the HOA had the nerve to exist. The more I read, the more certain I became that my grandfather had not only negotiated the valve rights as a favor to the county, he had deliberately kept the language tight, conservatively worded, and almost impossible to contest. He had been stubborn that way, pragmatic, legal, and a little vindictive in the best sort of way. The valve itself wasn't obvious. You couldn't just walk onto the dock and see it shining in the sun. It was a behemoth buried in a concrete pit beneath a rusted metal hatch at the far end of the old service dock. The kind of infrastructure most residents never noticed until something went wrong. I remembered my grandfather showing me that hatch once when I was a kid, how he explained water management in slow, patient sentences, and how he'd said, "Power like this belongs in paper, not in people's mouths." That memory became my compass. While the HOA continued their petty harassment, sending more letters, threatening fines, and even hiring a lawyer to send me a cease and desist for creating a neighborhood disturbance, I quietly set about readying myself. I measured the bolt patterns on the dock hinge, noted the work schedules of the marina staff, and mapped the paths of the surveillance cameras facing the water. I reached out to an old friend who ran a small engineering firm and explained, without drama, that I needed help inspecting a piece of family infrastructure for safety reasons. He agreed to come check the valve under the guise of a routine inspection. At night, I sat on my porch with the survey and the deed on my lap, the paper edges soft from handling, imagining the look on the HOA president's face when the truth hit, when their $5 million showpiece was revealed to be standing on someone else's legal ground. I rehearsed how to be patient, how to let them strut, and how to strike only when everything was lined up. The deed undeniable, the engineers ready, and the evidence of their overreach recorded. I also started talking to neighbors, not to rally an army, but to seed doubt. I brought nothing but coffee and quiet facts to porch conversations, showing people copies of the county map, pointing out the survey lines, and letting questions do the rest. Word spread like a breeze through dry grass. Curiosity turned to concern, and concern began to erode the aura of inevitability the HOA had constructed. They responded in the way bullies always do, by getting louder. New notices appeared on bulletin boards. Rumors were spread about environmental impacts and legal consequences. And the HOA president tried to paint me as a dangerous extremist who would do anything for revenge. It was a predictable playbook, and I watched it unfold with the kind of calm attention you give a storm you know you can weather. I would not let my grandfather's legacy be reduced to fines and apologies. He had left me a legal key, and I intended to use it to unlock a reckoning that was as clean and precise as the law itself. The morning our little operation began felt strangely ordinary, the kind of gray, humid dawn that makes everything smell of wet earth and possibility. But underneath that calm was the electric hum of plans, finally moving into motion. My engineer friend arrived with a compact team, paperwork in hand, and the polite professionalism of men who'd been asked to look at old infrastructure more times than they'd like. They didn't ask questions beyond the safety inspection I'd requested, and I kept it that way, because the fewer people who treated this like a showdown, the cleaner it would be. We opened the rusted hatch together, in the same careful way my grandfather had shown me years ago, and the pit below smelled of metal and old water, nothing theatrical, nothing cinematic, just the blunt honesty of machinery that had done its job for decades. The engineer nodded as he inspected the valve housing and then, almost casually, took out his phone and recorded the serial numbers, the county stamps, the maintenance tags. He called the county utility office and, on speaker, so the officers who would later listen could hear, read the registry that matched my family's rights, exactly the legal paperwork my grandfather had negotiated decades prior, clear as daylight. At that moment, I felt both the weight of lineage and the lightness of inevitability. Everything we'd prepared fell into place. I had the deed, the survey, the engineers, and the county registrar's confirmation. All that remained was timing and tact. I sent a single email to the HOA board, with a PDF of the county's records attached and a short, formal notice, because of a scheduled safety inspection and necessary maintenance of a privately owned control structure. Lake level adjustment would occur within 72 hours. I kept the tone neutral, almost bored, because fury reads differently on paper than it does in the heat of argument. Predictably, the board erupted the way the corner of a kettle does when someone leaves it on the stove too long. They spammed my inbox with threats, calls, and angry neighbors complained about potential environmental impacts. I answered none of it directly. Instead, I forwarded their noise to the county office and the environmental oversight contact. Because this wasn't a stunt, I had the law on my side and I intended to use it cleanly. As the day arrived to take action, the marina staff showed up curious, anxious, and finally polite when the county inspector explained that the control structure required verification under the original easement language. Cameras from nearby homes, once used to watch me, now pointed toward the dock and recorded everything they could because people love a spectacle. When the valve was tested carefully, by licensed personnel, with environmental safeguards in place, and with the county rep physically present, the water responded the way water always does, obedient to the mechanisms designed to manage it. I will not indulge in technical minutiae here, because this isn't an instruction manual, but the lake's level changed in a way that made the marina slips look like sunken skeletons of their former glory. Boats listed awkwardly, ropes sagged, and the plush boardwalk they used for gala weekends sat high and absurdly dry. Neighbors who had once clapped at the HOA president's pronouncements were now watching her flounder, as she tried to spin this into an environmental crisis while the county inspector read aloud the original terms of the easement showing my legal authority over the control apparatus. You could see the math happening in her head: loss of prestige, loss of revenue, and the sudden brutal realization that the $5 million valuation of their resort had been built on a bluff. As the water settled at a lower, managed level, suitable for inspection and repair, an odd thing happened. People who had clamored for spectacle began approaching me quietly, thanking me for exposing the truth. A few offered to help with repairs, some apologized for cheering the HOA on in the past. Most just wanted their access back without being bullied. The HOA president, meanwhile, made the rounds of angry phone calls and frantic legal threats. But with the county on side and the engineer's reports neatly filed, her bluster had the hollow ring of someone shouting into an empty house. By sundown, with the marina disabled for safety and photographs of the deed and county confirmations already viral across neighborhood message boards, it was no longer a petty feud but a public unmasking. The organization that had lorded over the lakeside was exposed as administratively fragile and financially vulnerable. I sat on the edge of the dock that evening, legs dangling over the lowered water, feeling an odd mixture of grief because nothing could bring back that barn and a slow, clarifying satisfaction that the law, patience, and careful planning had turned a family legacy into a reckoning. By the following week, the HOA president was unraveling in real time. She called an emergency community meeting in the clubhouse, trying to spin the lake drainage as an illegal stunt and pin the blame squarely on me. But the room wasn't the obedient echo chamber she was used to. People came armed with printouts of the deed I'd shared, screenshots of the county registry, and videos of the inspector standing right there at the valve hatch, reading the legal language aloud. The air in that room felt different, less fear, more fury, but this time, it wasn't aimed at me. Neighbors who had quietly grumbled for years about rising marina fees and bogus maintenance charges now spoke loudly, asking where their money had really gone if the HOA had never even owned the land the marina sat on. One older man in the back stood up, voice steady as a gunshot, and said, "You destroyed his barn for community standards, but you built your whole empire on property that wasn't even yours." The place erupted. The president tried to regain control, banging her gavel, threatening to fine anyone who spoke out of turn. But every word she uttered dug her hole deeper. I stayed quiet, sitting in the back row, arms folded, letting the chaos unfold. The county inspector had already filed his official report confirming my legal rights, and copies of it were floating around like wildfire. The board members, once her loyal foot soldiers, shifted in their seats, sweating, some refusing to even meet her eyes. A few days later, I got a call from one of those same board members practically begging me to negotiate. "Maybe we can work something out," he said, his voice cracking under the pressure. But I wasn't interested in deals. They'd crossed a line when they reduced my family's barn to rubble. And this wasn't about bargaining anymore, it was about accountability. So I told him, calmly and clearly, your president tore down something she didn't own. Now she gets to watch me manage something she never controlled. The silence on the other end told me he finally understood. That night, as I walked past the drained marina, now quiet and half abandoned, I realized the tables had turned permanently. The HOA had always thrived on intimidation, but their power had evaporated the moment the community saw the truth. What they didn't know yet was that I wasn't done, not by a long shot. The valve was just the beginning. With the county behind me and the marina legally under my authority, I was preparing to take full ownership, step by step, until the HOA had no ground left to stand on literally or legally. The revenge they thought was complete when they demolished my barn was only the prologue. The real story, the one that would define the neighborhood for decades, was about to unfold, and for the first time in years, I could breathe knowing I wasn't the one on the defensive anymore. The final blow came not with shouting or lawsuits, but with a single certified letter. Weeks of paperwork, surveys, and county filings had led me to that moment. When the envelope hit the HOA president's mailbox, it carried the weight of generations, an official notice that the marina, its docks, its parking lot, and the revenue streams attached to it were now under my legal ownership and management. The board had tried everything: petitions, threats, even a last-minute injunction, but the judge threw it out with barely a glance. You cannot regulate or profit from property you don't own, he said, his voice flat and final. Just like that, the HOA's crown jewel, the resort-style marina they'd used to hold the neighborhood hostage, was gone. The morning I walked down the boardwalk with my own keys in hand, the neighborhood felt lighter. People gathered on the shore, whispering, smiling, waiting to see what I would do. The president showed up too, of course, storming across the lot in her designer heels, her face a thundercloud. This isn't over, she hissed, jabbing a finger toward me. But the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. Some laughed openly, others filmed her meltdown, and one man shouted, "It's been over 4 weeks, pack it up." She froze, realizing the control she'd lorded over them was gone, ripped away not by force, but by her own arrogance. I turned to the people and raised my voice so all could hear. From today on, this marina belongs to the community. No more inflated fees. No more threats. Free launch access for residents. And any funds collected will go straight into real maintenance, not the HOA president's pocket. The cheer that followed was louder than I'd expected. Families clapped, kids shouted, even a few who had once stood against me walked over to shake my hand. The president, red-faced and shaking, stormed off without another word. That was the last time she ever tried to speak in public about the lake. Weeks later, as I stood on the dock with the sun setting over the water, my boat tied up beside me, I thought of my grandfather. His barn was gone, reduced to splinters by people who thought power meant paperwork and arrogance. But his foresight, the deed, the valve, the rights had given me the perfect weapon. They demolished my family's history, and in return, I dismantled their empire. With one twist of a valve and one set of papers, the $5 million resort lake they flaunted had slipped right through their fingers. And every time I hear the splash of water against the dock, every time I see neighbors enjoying the lake without fear of fines, I know this: the HOA thought they had broken me when they destroyed my barn. But all they did was hand me the chance to destroy their illusion of power forever.